I never dreamed that the day would come when I'd be considered a senior citizen of Soap Lake, or any afraid of it, especially Soap Lake. As I was a boy growing up, I thought, I'll never get that old, I guess, but here I am. And I guess you've had Paul and Julian here with you before, and I think about it quite often. We're probably, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I think we're probably the three really people that are still left that grew up in Soap Lake as young kids. And Julian came there, of course, when he was younger, but Paul, I was born in a house that's down here still standing and still being used on 3rd and C Street, Northwest. And there was a doctor there by the name of Dr. Ingersoll. And there was no hospital in the area at all at that time. So he had a couple of rooms set aside in his home where he delivered babies in one room, and I don't know what he did in the other room, but anyhow, my mother came from the hotel. A lot of people didn't know Mom was expecting. She was a big lady, as I don't know, you've seen pictures of her, I'm sure. And Mother, I've got pictures in those books there that show her when she was, it's hard to believe it's the same woman, she was so thin. But she got off the thin wagon somewhere, I guess, as years went along. And when I was born, most people in Soap Lake didn't know I was expected because she was so large. And
You were born here in Ephrata?
I was born in the house that Dr. Ingersoll had here at the time.
Give me the date, George, please.
9/8/26. And so he took care of me, and then my sister was all upset because she wasn't able to come over here and find out whether she didn't know Mom was when she was going to have the baby, and nobody told her. So anyhow, when I finally was born, my sister couldn't wait until I got home because she always wanted a baby brother. And my sister is 9 years older than I am. And God rest her soul, she's gone now too. In my growing up years, I had such good times, and I look back on it, and there's no comparison anymore of what the kids do nowadays, and I don't really think they're having a very good time because they're getting in trouble all the time, a lot of them. But we didn't have anything really exciting to do out there at Soap Lake, except we enjoyed swimming, and a bunch of us kids, especially the boys, would get together and we'd play baseball. And in the wintertime, we'd play basketball out in the snow behind the grade school. And we just had good get-togethers and didn't think about going out and raising Cain and trying to get in trouble. And I think maybe part of the reason for that is that I think most of us knew what would happen when we got home. And your parents had heard about it because they handle things a little different than they do today. In fact, I think I still got a bruise on my fanny where Mom just paid me off for something. And I tried to convince her I didn't do it, but she didn't listen to me very good. And so anyhow, Mother came to this country from Ireland. And she got off the ship in New York and went through Ellis Island, and then she was there. She had a sister meet her at the dock in New York. She lived with her sister for a while, and then she decided she wanted to go on her own. And so she went over to, I think, Bellingham. She had a sister over there, one that was a nurse and one was a nun. So she went over and spent quite a bit of time with them, and while she was with them, she got the idea in her mind she'd kind of like to be a nurse. So she studied nursing there with her sister for, I don't know how many years before she was declared she was a nurse. And then she met my father, I'm pretty sure, in Spokane. and Dad was a nurse. And they both worked at the hospital in Spokane. I think it was the Sacred Heart. And then they ended up getting married. And after they got married, they moved to a little place called, and you probably have all been there maybe, Newport, Washington, which is just north of Spokane. And they ran a hospital for the community there. They ran the community hospital and took care of sick people. And then my father started having asthma problems. And so they didn't know what to do. They finally decided to go to the coast, and they moved over to Seattle for a little while, and after they were a while, they found out Dad wasn't doing a bit better. And for some reason or other, they realized when they were in this part of the country, his breathing was a lot better than it was anywhere else. So they came back to Newport and somehow heard about the hotel in Soap Lake. And at that time, it was called the Aragon Hotel. And it hadn't been built too long. I think it was built in the very early 20s because Mom and Dad bought the hotel in 23. And so then they started running that, and they had, there was 11 rooms upstairs to rent, and there was a nice dining hall and a lobby, pretty good sized kitchen, and then a bedroom off the kitchen where Mom and Dad stayed. And the poor things, when you think back about it, they worked themselves so hard for 3 months because you had, when school got out in first part of June, you had June, July, and August. And then after that, winter was starting to set in, and there weren't very many people coming to Soap Lake in the middle of winter time. Because what are you going to do in Soap Lake in the middle of winter? Older people or young people, if they didn't live there already. So it was a hard life, and they served 3 square meals a day. And the rooms upstairs had no running water. They had a dresser kind of like with a pretty good sized bowl for put water in if you wanted to wash your hands or that. And there was community toilets at the end of the hall. The women had one side and the men had the other. And they had a bathtub on each side and then the toilet itself. And so, of course, if somebody wanted to go take a bath, they had to work it out somehow to lock the door so they could take their bath. But the people that came to our place at the hotel for so many years, that's when they really started hearing about Brigger's disease. And so an awful lot of them that came there, they took mud baths and they took a lot of Soap Lake baths. They took usually in the hotel, or some of them would go down and spend days sometime at the beach in the lake.
When they rented their rooms, did the bath come with it, or did that cost separate?
No, it was all one deal.
Oh.
And you wouldn't believe, you won't believe it because it's hard for me to believe, but you could come to stay at the hotel. This is in the 30s. And you could have a room, 3 square meals a day, and whatever else. If you wanted to take a bath, I'm just sure they didn't charge extra for anywhere from $25 to $30 a week.
My goodness.
And my mother was an excellent cook. She was very good, and so of course, and they had a fairly good sized dining room. They could probably feed about 15 or 20 people at a time, but you could only get so many in the hotel at that time too, with just 11 rooms. And as time went on, Mom, it's kind of a good little story, I'm going to have to tell you about it. Mom decided she wanted to put an addition on the hotel to the east. So that little squib you see sticking out from the hotel now, that was put on probably in the early 40s, maybe late 30s. There was a bank here in Ephrata, Granite County State Bank, And Mom used to do quite a bit of business with him. And that's where she done her banking in that. There was no bank in Soap Lake or anybody at any place at that time. And so Mom went to the bank to borrow some money to put this addition on. I think it was around $4,000 or $5,000. Well, the board of the bank turned her down. My mother, for you, most of you probably know, was a Irish woman, and they better have a good reason as to why they turned something down on Mom, because she wouldn't just say, okay, thank you, and leave. She got on the telephone, a guy by the name of Shorty Higgins. He had a wheat farm up by Heartline, and he done real well, Shorty did, but he had an impediment in his speech. You know, he's a guy that couldn't talk very good. So Mom, of course, knew Shorty pretty well, because they got to know each other through the years. He always brought Mom a bottle of Irish whiskey for St. Patrick's Day, because that's what my mother's birthday was, on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh.
And so Shorty was a real good friend, and he was also on the board. So Mom got on the phone and told Shorty, she said, "I want you to stop by when you're down this way, Shorty." Okay, evidently. So one of those days, I just happened to be there, and here comes Shorty. "How are you, Maggie?" You know, and all this and that, and they started shooting the bull. He says, "Well, you called, wanted me to stop by. What seems to be the problem?" These are some of the words. I'm sure I'm not selling anywhere near right, but just the story will come out the same. In their conversation, Mom informed Shorty that the bank had turned her down for whatever amount of money it was to put this addition on the hotel. And she just let into Shorty something terrible, because he was on the board. And she, you know, what all she said to him, I have no idea really anymore. Only thing I can remember is poor Shorty. He wasn't a real big man, but he was a nice fellow. But he had this impediment. And finally, after he listened to Mom for so long, he said, "Jesus Christ, Maggie." He said, "Don't keep haunting me. I'll do what I can do for you." And so he left. And sure enough, it wasn't too long before Mom got the loan. So then they went ahead and put that addition on the east side of the hotel.
Do you know approximately when it was put on? What year?
Oh gosh, and that's what I was trying to think, whether I was in grade school or in high school. I think it was probably in the late 30s, but I'm not exactly sure.
So just to get my head around it, there's the Argonne or the Waltho Hotel. And then it was Barkey's or something like that.
Yeah, Barkey bought it.
And then that section that's in there now, that newer looking section, that's the section your mother had built on?
No, well, to the
east.
To the east, those apartments
okay,
or whatever,
okay.
and they were.
I got myself all backwards.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. They were real swanky rooms in those days, and I think there were 6 rooms, and they had adjoining baths, and they done this and done that, and it was so much different. They had running water, and upstairs you had nothing, you know, except a bathroom and a toilet and a bed with a thing in it to wash your hands and that in if you wanted to.
George, what was it like having being a young man or a kid growing up with all these sick people in your house? Did you eat meals with them and this sort of thing, or did you think much of it? Or?
I never gave any thought, but you know, the people that we had at our place that were Burger's disease people, a lot of them came back year after year, and they weren't certainly not going to give you Burger's disease. It's not something you catch. These fellows got most of it from the First World War. And of course, you know what it is. It's gradually eating away. It's kind of like leprosy. And there was a number of fellows that lived in the Soap Lake when I was a boy that had a little cart, I guess you call it, with wheels on all 4 corners. And then they had those rubber gloves or rubber mitt, whatever, and they ran themselves all around town and pushing themselves on those, and their little stumps were like that. That was sitting on the cart with their fanny. And there was a fellow by the name of Harvey Thompson that lived up on the hill to the east. As you go through town, you go up that hill at the end. And he was a character because he used to get out there. He wanted to go downtown, and he'd just get out there on the road or close to it and let himself go from up there and coast clear downtown. It was a chore to get back up it, but yeah. So
when you were growing up, across the street where there's an empty lot now, and then you have that little bluff behind it and stuff, what was in there?
there was an apartment house.
Apartment house. Do you remember the name of it?
Yeah, it's in that.
It's in there?
It's in that book. One of them, Anderson. I think by the name of Anderson. Well, when the mom lost out as mayor one year, a fellow by the name of Al Tillman. I think Tillman's had it, and it was I don't remember, it was a 1 or 2 story building. It was right straight across the street from the hotel.
So it was just that one building that was in that area?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Yeah. And then up above, probably you heard about that, Earl McKay, he had a house built. He'd stayed at our hotel for a number of years. He'd come down, he grew up in Wilbur.
Uh-huh.
And then he built a house up on top of that hill. If you looked out the front door of the hotel and you looked up on top.
I've been up there and there's steps still leading up, and then there is a foundation
Yeah.
still up there.
And that's where Earl McKay lived for a number of years.
Great.
And there's another silly little story. Makes you sound like what a character I must have been. But Earl McKay stayed at our hotel a good many years, off and on. And so he got to be such a good friend, such a buddy to me, that my mother, why she did this, I don't know. I guess I was a little stinker sometimes when it come to eating my dinner. So she started putting my dinner on the same plate Earl had his. And so she'd put it on the table, and she'd tell me it was time to eat, and I used to say, no, I don't want that. And she said, well, Earl's going to have something like that, and I got your food right with his. When I found out my food was on the same plate he had, I couldn't wait to eat. I sat next to Earl and ate all the food.
Smart lady, your mother.
Yeah. So that went on for quite a long while. And of course, you've probably heard about just like a number of us young fellows were Boy Scouts when the hospital was built, and we were there to dedicate it. And that was because of Earl McKay, and it was a nice hospital. And of course, when the Second World War broke out and the air base started out here, there was no hospital at the base. They took over that one out there. They had the Soap Lake Hospital. I can't tell you for sure whether the general public could still use it or not, but I knew the Air Force used it quite a bit. And so they used that.
Do you remember them shooting the drones up around Lake Lenore and stuff during the war?
Yeah, they got a rock up there they
used to shoot off of, and
they
pull the drones through
what do they call that? Machine gun rock or something that's between, it's like you say,
right
it's
on the
off
south
the
end
office.
of Lenore.
Yeah. So, I don't know, I got so many things written down that, like the New Beach Hotel, when I was a boy growing up, it was the swanky place to stay in Soap Lake. And of course, then it burned. And that took care of that for quite a while. And then they rebuilt it, and it burned again. And then, of course, it ended up Marina put that burned. But where Don's is now, and maybe all of you know this, that was a garage was built there for people that stayed at the New Beach Hotel to put the cars in undercover. So that was used a lot for that when people, and they had the more ritzy type of people stay with them, I guess. And then when that ran out, it was made into a fellow by the name of Owen Hambright. He made it into a cleaning business. He had a cleaning shop in there. And I don't remember how long Owen was there, but he ran it quite a while and done, because people used to have to always send all their stuff to, if they wanted a dry clean, it had to go to Ellensburg. So Owen ran that for quite a little while, and then I don't know, anyhow, he got out of it.
When was that started, the dry cleaning? Do you remember? Because I know there was a dry cleaners there in '75 when I came back from Illinois.
In that building?
That was Joe
Yeah.
Green.
Is that
Huh?
Joe Green?
Joe Green.
Okay.
Was it there? Was it
Which building was?
across or where Marina is now, or
Uh-huh.
where the restaurant?
Yeah, part of the banquet room was,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, yeah, that also had utility room. That was, oh shoot, maybe you remember, Linda, the name of the fellow that had the appliance store there for quite a few.
Norland Wetzel,
Dave Gnarly.
Yeah,
Norland,
they had that for quite a while, but that whole building there was a dance hall for a while, where Marina is a restaurant. And then after the restaurant, this had to be, I guess, well, the Air Force was here. They made it into of all people, Red Russian made it into a restaurant. And he had the personality of 3 bulls.
I knew Red, he loved to argue.
Oh, it was terrible. I thought to myself, how can this man run a business and have as good a business as he had, and as sour a puss he had, and the orneriness he was full of, and still make a go of it? But he sure did so. But you had to make reservations almost any time you wanted to go out there for a long time. But that's no longer that way now. But he was an ornery cuss. I didn't. But there was another hotel too over in that, again, I don't know whether Linda would remember, on the west side called the Johnson Hotel. And it was a wooden 2-story building. It was on the west side in the area of the nudist colony. And it finally went, people gave up on it. I don't know what happened. It was there a long time. And then they moved out or something happened. Anyhow, it became empty and was never used again. Well, a fellow by the name of, Les Morton, I guess a lot of you people know Les, his father, they had a dairy farm up at High Hill in Soap Lake, and his father was looking for lumber to build a new barn. And they ended up selling Morton that building for practically nothing for the lumber. So him and his kids, they tore that building down and took the lumber and went up on High Hill and built a barn with it. And so, of course, there's no sign of it ever being there anymore.
So this is way around by the.
It's before you get the nudist
the
colony,
Boy
I
Scout
think.
flag and all way on that Sam Israel land. Is it way into
It's not way up where Sam was. It's well,
on Lake Shore Drive.
when you went around the lake, when you get around to that side, somewhere up towards where that nudist colony area is at, it was in that area. And I don't know when it was built, but there was nothing else there to speak of it. I'm not too sure when they started the nudist colonies. From what I can remember as a kid, it was always there when I was growing up, because that was a big chore for us boys to try and swim around the lake and see if we could get to the girls' nudist colony.
You know, the church, the Catholic Church in Soap Lake, Our Most Sorrowful Mother, was that built when you were a kid?
Yeah, Paul Kloss and I were there when it was dedicated. Bishop White from Spokane came down, and
You were an altar boy, weren't you?
we were altar boys then too. And, you know, we spent a lot of time keeping the priests straightened out and that, because they weren't doing it the way we thought they should. And so, but anyhow, yeah,
There's no bathroom in there, was there, George? in that
No.
church?
And that's a shame. And of course, that's bothered me ever since that all happened, because it was a great little church, really. Other than if they'd have fixed it up again, They would have had to have running water and a restroom and this and that, but there were so many people in Soap Lake that were more than willing,
Yes.
over and above what the insurance would give, to do that. They would have done it in a minute. In fact, we had some meetings here in the school basement, and the mayor, I don't remember at that time who the mayor was, come over to the meeting, and he more or less begged the bishop and that to leave that church open. Well, they never would come right out and tell you what they were going to do. They finally got in a corner somewhere and decided they weren't going to do it. It would cost too much, and that was a bunch of hogwash. It would have cost, sure, but we had people. Well, you remember Richard Bontius, that guy who was up in the hill? And of course, Richard and I grew up together. And probably Richard, I don't know that he ever went to church in his life, but when this happened out there, he, one of the first guys willing to, whatever, he'd donate quite a chunk of money towards restoring it. You know, he said, I just think the town needs it. And I think so too. It was a nice building, and it would have lasted forever, really, made out of brick and, you know. But it was, of course, sentimental to us because my mother and father were both buried from there, and Rita and I were married there, and so it meant a lot to us. But and there were a lot of people out at Soap Lake who were real upset, but they didn't seem to be able to do much about it. And of course, once those fellows down in Yakima make up their mind on certain things, it's pretty hard to change it, I guess. So they lost it, and it's a shame.
And you used to play with the little native boys when they'd come down, and I think once you told me you would play with the little native boys when they'd come down, the Indian boys.
Oh, the Indian.
Where would you play, and what would you do?
The Indian boys?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we used to go out. They used to come up, a lot of them come from Yakima, a lot of them come up that way. And they had horses, and the horses, poor old horses, were so sway-backed, all you had to do was put your leg up in the air and sit down because their backs were just something terrible. But we'd go out there and we'd let them ride our bicycles if we could ride their horse. I think they got the best deal of it, really. The horses were pretty tired and sad, and then we just ding-dongs around, just nothing special that I can remember. Big
They'd
thing.
ride horseback all the way from Yakima to the lake for the water, or why would they come up here?
Come up in the dig camas. There was a food of theirs that they liked real well, and that was one of the areas they could find it. And they'd come up here and spend, I don't know, a couple of weeks, I suppose, or longer, and then work there. And every summer they did that for a long time. And then, I don't know, through the years, I guess it's like a lot of things, it kind of wore itself out. They quit coming, and I suppose they decided there was a lot better things in Camas anymore. I don't know.
And you saw the same kids every year? They would come back? the same
Most of them, yeah, quite a few of them.
George, I see that in one of these postcards that I have, there's an old taxi cab out in front of the Waltho Hotel. And it was dated 1942 on the license plate, and it says for hire. Who ran the taxi cab?
Well, I think I think my dad kind of had a cab in a way if people really needed a ride somewhere, but I'm not that real positive. I don't know I can't recall who had a cab out there.
'Cause it says
Just
for
like
hire
somebody.
on the license plate.
Yeah, and that's in front of the hotel.
Yeah.
That's probably Dad, and he probably did do some cab
Well,
work.
your dad's car.
Yeah, looks like it.
See, here's the house right across the street from you. That was
Yeah.
a 2-story.
Yeah, that was an apartment house.
That was that apartments you're talking about.
I've got a real good picture in that other book that shows
hotel.
you pretty well can tell. I don't have to look at it, but you know, when you look, Main Street has really changed. Well, it's just not like it was when I was a kid. Again, I get to reminisce, and when we were kids growing up, we just had a ball in Soap Lake. You know, we found we had good times together. We didn't go out and raise a lot of cane, but we had a lot of fun, and
So did you spend a lot of time on that outcropping of ground that used to be out in the middle of the road there?
Well, I'm
That was
say,
right across the street from you
say
there.
we spent a lot of time. I used to play a lot of kick the football a lot in front of the street. And that's hard to believe, or in front of the hotel. It's hard to believe that the main highway went through town like that, and it was all pretty much gravel. Except the main part was some
It actually had gravel on it, or was it
but
just
it had gravel on the sides and the blacktop in the middle.
Well, and actually,
Oh, I had that. I left a napkin there, but it's probably gone. But
we had another hotel out there. Linda, you might remember
A
that
napkin in
one.
that one.
that's the one.
What was the name of the hotel that us kids grew up knowing about?
Oh,
the
that was the
two-story?
desert apartment.
The desert apartments, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Where was that?
I think most of you out there at Soap Lake, you know, when I got out of the Navy, the way things worked out, it was a real surprise to me. I came home, and of course I went to the hotel. And when I got to the hotel, who do I see there but Barcroft? And I thought, what in the world is going on, or something like that. And so I come to find out, Mom and Dad had sold the place to Barcroft, and they never told me. So here I am going in the hotel looking for Mom and Dad, and they said, well, they're across the street. And I said, where at? Across the street. I said, what do you mean across the street? That building over there. Well, that was before the war broke out. That was a mud bath house. The guy had mud baths and baths and so forth in there. Trying to remember his name. And then I think he's the one that when the war did break out, he decided his business was not going as good as you'd think it would anymore. So he put the top on it and made apartments up there on top. I think there was about 5 apartments up above. And there was a couple down below, besides where Mom and Dad lived. And so they told me that's where Mom and Dad was. I thought, good Lord. I thought if they ever got out of here, they'd do something. They were just as bad off as where they're at, except they didn't. Well, they quit giving meals quite a few years before that. Because of the war, you couldn't get food. You know, you had to have stamps and all. Mom decided it wasn't worth all the hassle.
I see
So-
a newspaper where you guys put in a florist shop and a bar in your hotel at one time.
No, that was, Linda, I don't know if you remember or not. It's on the right-hand side as you go through behind the brick building on the corner. Let's see, there's nothing there now, is there? There used to be a building there, and it had a sleeping quarters and that in it. But the front part was kind of made, you could use it for a store. And so there was a couple of people used it. And one person had to use it for a nursery, kind of. Had flowers and stuff in it and sold flowers out of that. There's another one, I'm not sure whether it burned or, well, it did burn, come to think of it. Pat O'Brien, I think it was Pat O'Brien that eventually married Catherine Arvin. I think he was running it when it caught fire. And
I want to ask also about the street that was named after your mom in honor of your mother. You told me about that a little bit. You remember, was there a dedication or a special ceremony for that?
did they? No, I didn't. And then it kind of teased me off because I guess I was not forward enough. I realized they had named that road going past this side of McNamara's hayfield, going up to that new development up there, and that road was called Waltho Street. So I went through there one day and I looked, and there was no sign. There was no sign there at all. It was gone. So I called City Hall, and they referred me to the maintenance man or somebody. And I asked him what happened to the sign that used to be there. He said, I don't know, but I'm presuming that the harrow bed probably went by there and hooked it and pulled it off. And I said, well, it's not even laying there now. I said, "Do you think it'd still be there?" Well, he says, "I really don't know then." But I said, "Well, I think they ought to do something about it." Well, he says, I'll check with whoever he checks with." So I finally talked to him again. He said, well, they weren't going to name it Waltho Street anymore. They were naming that section there after flowers or trees or something, whatever they decided to name them. So they eliminated it, and I really been, in my own mind, been to go to a council meeting for years, and I haven't done so, but I should, and ask them why they don't. If there's anybody that ever deserves some kind of recognition about Soap Lake, and it just happens to be my mother, for all she did for Soap Lake, and the things she did for them, and she's never was recognized. You know, here she was mayor, I think. She replaced Delancey, who passed away in the middle of his term. And then I think, I'm just nearly positive, she ran 2 more times and won the 2. And then a fellow by the name of Tillman beat her out on the 3rd, and she was heartbroken. She still wanted to be mayor. But she spent so much of her own money, and you know, wherever she went, she got to be quite a notoriety in all places. But like I was telling somebody, I really think they should honor in some way or another. And I need to get out to a council meeting, but it's just like where the city hall is. See, that's where we went to grade school. That's where they had the grade school at the time. And Mom was responsible for that new city hall. And I think they should name that. The other one, they'll probably, if they decide to give something a name, they'll give this other one to them. It was a new disposal plant. It'd be just like someone to say, put the Waltho disposal plant. But anyhow, they haven't done anything about it. And so, you know, Dad was a wonderful man too, and what all he'd done. Like I was telling somebody, he was on the school board when Delancey and Houghton were there, 8 or 10 years, or 6 or 8 years. His name was never mentioned. You wonder why, you know. Anyhow, it was never on there, so it's just as if he wasn't around, and he spent a good many days and hours working for that school district.
So who were Delancey and Houghton, and why was the school named after them? I don't know.
Well, they were on the school board,
Ah.
and Delancey at the time, downtown Soap Lake, where the Shell station is now, right near practically that corner was a place called the Dewdrop Inn, and it was a grocery store. And then, let's see, what was I going to say about him?
Delancey and Houghton.
Oh yeah, he had that deal there. See, and he had the grocery store. Well, and then he got reelected mayor, so he became mayor. And then during his mayorship, I don't know whether he had to run more than once or not, but in the middle of his 2nd term, he passed away. Delancey did. Houghton had the lumberyard up at the west end of town, where that little old. They're always trying to sell.
Charities,
Yeah,
West Haven,
that
they
was.
call it now.
Yeah, and he lived right behind it in the house back there, and his family. And so those 2 guys, anyhow, they were on the school board, and Dad was there too. Which is why they didn't recognize his name. I guess you'll never know, as everybody's gone. But
Do you remember Corky Spaulding?
oh yeah, Spaulding. Yeah, he was there's articles in there about him and I there too, because he was a great friend of ours, and especially mine at the place, because his garage was right next to the hotel. There's a space probably from here to the tree out there between us.
There's
But it was
nothing
a
there
big
now.
wooden building, and he used to work on cars and that a lot in there. And then whenever I had any trouble with my wagon, I'd go see Spaulding, and he'd fix it up for me.
You
Then
remember?
he used to have a couple of the old style gas pumps, where you used to pump them up and fill them up with gas, you know. Well, he used to let me do that because I thought that was a lot of fun. So I used to pump up his gas pump. But it wasn't that busy in those days. You know, you remember a lot of people didn't come in the cars. It was a hassle to get here to begin with because you had terrible roads from the coast over here, and so most people come on the train or the bus. And we had probably at least 2 buses each, 2 this way and 2 that way during the day. So there's probably about at least 4 buses came through Soap Lake especially during the summer months. And the trains, of course, just one way both times. But then, like the folks, Julian's father and my father, of course, Paul's dad used to go out and pick up the mail all the time. But my dad and Julian's dad, they went out there with their cars and offered people, if they knew people had a reservation, of course, there's no problem. If they didn't have a reservation and they needed a ride into town, they'd give them a ride into town and try to convince them to stay at their place. And so that went on for quite a while. And it's hard to believe, people have probably told all of you, but they call it Grand Orchards, and that's not what it was. It was nothing but orchards out there, beautiful. When you think back about it, it was really kind of nice. You used to go across the tracks, and once you got across the track, then there was the old 2-story grade school on your left. You started going, you just about right away would run into orchards, and you go down so far. It's just about like the road is now. Turn to your right and go down to the fish hatchery. But in between all that area was orchards, and they had one of the fellows that had an orchard. Wouldn't know his name. He had a well fixed so the water would come right out by the road, and he had it in such a way that you could fill up a jug or get a drink or do this or that, and then of course it would go back somewhere to the ground. And people just about used to make trips to go by there and get a jug of water. It was just ice cold. It was really good. And then years went on, they pulled out the orchards and started putting houses up. That was considered one of the biggest orchards in the United States when it was in production. And the people built that home to stay in. And I don't know how many people they had working for them, but it covered that whole area in there with orchard. And of course, you used to see all that because the roads went right by a lot of those places, or they don't anymore. They bypass so much of it. You used to go right through. Well, you didn't go through Marlin because it was on the other side of the tracks, but you used to go near Wilson Creek. But it was anyhow. You took the bus. That's the way. I only went to Spokane once a year, I think, and that was usually something because I went up once and I had my tonsil and adenoids out once, and Mom took me on the bus for that, and I went up for some other thing on the bus. So it's about the only way to travel. Didn't go on the train, and I would have rather rode the train, but it didn't work out that way.
Can you tell a little bit, you told me once when we were at the theater about where Masters Theater is built now, the people had a fruit stand or a hamburger stand. Could you talk a little bit about, I thought that was really interesting.
Well, her name was Ira Root. And there's a thing you think about it now. Can you imagine how that would be there today now if you just close the blinds at night and hope to come back the next day and find it was all still there? But she had I don't know whether it was maybe it was before your time, or maybe you remember it or not. But it was a really nice, quite a nice, nothing fancy, but well-built stand there, and she had to close it at night, where she had stuff out on these shelves. And then she take that in, then those things lifted up and locked from the inside. And the main part was right on the sidewalk there when you went walking by. And I don't recall whether she had anything on the 2 sides or not, that you could open and go in. But I know she used to do, it was amazing the amount of business she'd done there in the summer months.
So she'd sell produce, or what did she sell?
Yeah, mostly produce. And I doubt if she spent knickknacks like they do today. I think most of it was just food items. I don't think anything more than produce. I don't think she got it. And she'd done real well there for a good many years. I don't know whether it got tore down or whatever became of it. Of course, she probably passed away like a lot of them did, you know. But like where the Bob White Cafe is, used to be the cafe, and part of the cafe was the tavern. They had the tavern, and then next to that was a fellow by the name of Joe Kriegbum. Joe had a newsstand there, and the creek used to have a creek that came down out of the hills here, and it used to go right underneath the sidewalk of the highway, and it went underneath that building and came out and went into Soap Lake. And Joe had put a duck pin bowling alley in there, and us kids used to go down there and set pins for him. I think it was about 2 or 3 cents a line and it was a bad deal in a way. You just sat they had a seat between the 2 alleys, and then you hope when the guys hit the pins, they didn't all come and hit you. It was really not a very safe place.
So this would be by where the liquor store is now?
The liquor store's on the other side of the street.
The liquor, no, well,
Didn't
that
it?
was then. Right now, the one today is
Yeah.
where the old newsstand was.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah. At least I think it's either that, it's got to be one of the, there was nothing that, like you say, the theater wasn't there. That's where Ira was, I think. What is there, 3 buildings there now? Anyhow, it was one of those buildings, the creek ran right underneath, and Joe had a newsstand in there, and the water used to run off the hills up here in the spring, and it ran all the way from up there, clear down through the golf course area, and down through there, and finally come out. I don't remember anymore where it came out in Soap Lake, and it used to go right out into Soap Lake. And that was always a fun thing for us kids, because we used to like to see the water coming, you know, and ding-donging around. So,
Do you remember the Shady Nook?
pardon?
The Shady Nook was past your folks' hotel, and it was a court of cabins on the east side, and it had rock, it's still there, and it has rock columns, and the houses are made of rock.
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Hensel lived there when I was a child, but I don't know who lived there before then. Do you remember that? It was probably a couple of acres of property.
And they're still there, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember who lived there?
Yeah, shoot, I used to know the name of the people that owned it, and I don't recall right now. I don't know that it's in that picture anywhere, but I don't know, it wouldn't be. I don't recall. And,
Now, did you ever go to movies when you were a kid?
yeah, the theater. I remember there's kind of a personal story again, but a girl by the name of Fontel Wyckoff, did you by chance know? Anyhow, Fontel was in my grade, and she grew up in Soap Lake part of the time. And then they left there when they graduated from grade school, and moved over here. Her mother, she went by the name of Wyckoff, and her father passed away. So they moved over here, and she ended up marrying Jack Daling. But while we were in grade school together, of course, I was madly in love with Fontel. We used to play post office, and I looked forward to playing post office quite often. But anyhow, they moved over here, and it's funny how things work out. She went one way, and I kind of went the other way. We were in the same class, but you just didn't have to really do much with each other anymore. But poor girl, she passed away suddenly, so yeah, it's too bad.
Do you remember Carilla Spalding?
Oh, yeah. I guess she's still in Moses Lake.
She lives in Moses Lake.
Yeah, her husband was the mayor there at one time.
Her husband is Norm Spalding, and he's passed away, and Carilla is doing fine.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen her since, I don't know when.
Since she graduated.
You remember the days down on the West Beach with the ice cream parlor and the when they'd have merry-go-round and Ferris wheel out there on the West Beach?
Yeah, it was quite a, there's a lot of things they had that you just, I'll leave that for now, that you don't, like it said, there's a place down there, well, straight down your place that had the place there you could go in and get her something to drink or ice cream or I think you could rent bathing suits there, I'm not sure, towels.
Keith has a picture of bathing suits, wool bathing suits they used to rent out.
Did they?
Yeah.
Well, you remember there was where what's his name is now, Woody, as the drive-in. There used to be a building right practically in that spot that you could go to and you could rent stuff for the water, bathing suits and towels and whatever, and you could almost go out the back door and go into the lake.
It was higher then.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was
yeah.
it right there. Right when they used to have the gazebo and the dock, the
Yeah.
old swimming dock.
Yeah, they had that in the West Beach or East Beach.
But that was where they rented the swimming suits right there. It says you could rent suits there.
Oh yeah.
And that was the gazebo that was out there. Do you remember the gazebo that used to be out on the water off
Oh
the
yeah.
East Beach?
There was quite a place out there. There used to be quite a place, like I said, out in the waterways that was on pillars, you know, and you could swim out there, and then it was a good size. It had a roof over it, and you could dive off of it, and it was a fun place to go. And of course, when I was a little, people used to come to Soap Lake. You wouldn't believe it. Somebody had a picture here they were showing me of. It was Linda, the people that were on the beach in Soap Lake. And I can remember, this is hard to believe, but I can remember going up to the West Beach to go swimming, and you had to, if you wanted to walk on the sand, you could walk down by the water with no problem. But if you wanted to walk on the sand, you had to be real careful you didn't step on somebody. There was people all over up there laying in the sun. And that kind of wore out. So many things changed when the air base came here, and then after the war, when the Columbia Basin project started taking hold. And it just kind of seemed like it just killed so many of these things that were so good for so long. It makes you feel bad. I go to Soap Lake now every once in a while, you know, and it just makes me sick when I see what's happened through the years when it used to be the only place to go to in Grant County. There was no place to compare with it. There's nothing in Ephrata. There still isn't really, except some offices, but Soap Lake had baseball games almost every Sunday, and they had that little silly bowling alley. It had the best theater in the county.
Where was the movie theater in Soap Lake?
What's her name? The woman, the hairdresser, right on the corner when you're up at the west end.
Mildred Jenkins.
And you go right. If you went instead of turning, if you went straight ahead, you'd run into the theater, and the Egernoff Hotel was next to it.
Oh, okay.
Phil Wick has the base that was under the theater, under the screen and stuff back there where
Oh, I
he's
didn't
got.
realize that, okay.
And going down that alley, that has the pathways that went back.
The theater.
Where they had an underground tunnel that went all the way back over to the other end of the building.
Really?
So, George, when you were growing up, most of the swimming, the sunbathing and all, very many on the...
Well, there was quite a few, but most of the people that swam on the East Beach were looking for the mud.
Oh, okay.
And for some silly reason, the West Side didn't have all that mud. It had more of, whether it was somebody went in there deliberately sometime years ago and put lighter sand or something in there, but it just never, at the East Beach, you used to go out, you'd go clear down in it. Mm-hmm. And the other beach, you just didn't.
Was that why they put the swimming dock and the stuff, that was so that
Well,
people could get into the
I don't
deeper
know.
water and into the mud?
About the only thing I remember about that is I remember seeing it as far as having anything that was built a little bit before I came around.
It's made out of used lumber because you can look at the tails and stuff and see nail holes in the old lumber. So
Yeah.
they took some building down to build the dock.
Yeah.
You used to get kicked out of your own bedroom when the hotel was full, is that true?
Yeah, that's a good story, Mom. It was always full in the summertime. Never had so they decided in order for me to have a place to sleep, they'd get this tent. So we got the tent. So we made a floor for the tent and used to stick it up in the backyard of the hotel. So then when the hotel got full, Mom would rent the tent out. So then I'd come home with the idea of going to bed, and my bed was rented. So I had to find something to just go out and lay down. There wasn't much grass. Lay down on the grass and go to sleep.
How many brothers and sisters did you have growing up?
Did I? I just had one sister.
One sister, okay.
Yeah. And she was 9 years older than I am. She was awful good to her little brother. But, yeah, oh, shoot, Linda, what was you were saying? Oh, yeah, it was amazing how many, in the summertime, if you didn't have reservations, you better come with the idea you were going to just do the best you can somewhere. There was no way. Folks were full every summer.
What did you do in the summer when you were in the teenage years as far as working around town? Did you just work at your parents' place, or did
You hit the nail on the head. And I wanted to go to work, and not that there was a lot of work to be done. Like most kids, you want to go somewhere else not at home. But I'm really, even Madeline has to admit it, I'm a pretty good chambermaid. Because when I grew up in the hotel, I used to say to Mom and Dad, I like to go somewhere and try and get a job for the summer. They said, you don't have to. I said, why? Because you got all you can do right here. So I learned how to make beds and clean toilets and dust and mop, and I just was there. I spent one summer, one time, there used to be a clothesline on the other side, on the east side of the hotel. And there was a cabin there too at one time. I think the cabin's still standing, and past that cabin was quite a bit of clothesline. So that's where Mom used to hang a lot of her clothes at. But underneath that clothesline, you always had this salt grass. And it was a pain to get it out. And so I thought one summer, every summer I had to do something. I don't remember what I had to do with it, but I made up my mind this one summer I was going to get rid of that sucker. I was getting tired of fooling with this stuff every summer. So I got down on my hands and knees, and I spent practically the whole summer pulling that saltweed out, thinking that it wouldn't come back. All I do is disturb it. I think it was better more than ever the next time. So that didn't work. But no, and there used to be down on the East Beach, down there in that area, there was a pretty good baseball diamond. They used to play baseball down there. And when I was really a little guy, there used to be a real nice ball diamond and grandstand up at your end, up at where that housing project is, this side of the hospital. Mm-hmm. Well, there used to be the grandstand set right in the corner, and then you hit to the, what'd you hear? You'd hit southwest. Home plate was back here, and you used to hit out that direction. And then when the hospital, I guess it must be because the hospital came or something, they had to do away with that, and they ended up making a field down at the beach down there. And,
what about the racetrack, where they had stock cars? Or
had stock cars kind of up where, oh shoot, where would you call it? It was up at the west side, southwest part of town.
By the new school, maybe? Or?
Yeah, it was up by the sewer plant, kind of.
Well, near that area, the sewer plant, yeah.
Right
and that's where they started. I mean, they done real well there.